Hello and welcome to today's video on high altitude investing. Today's video is going to be how to trade Ethereum Classic updated. I've made a video on this in the past, but I wanted to point out some extra things today and give you guys a little bit more in depth of what I've been doing for Ethereum Classic and some things to keep in mind inside of Ethereum Classic when you're trading that coin specifically. So just a couple things I'd like to point out is my Twitter handle, Marshall's Twitter handle, my email, and the website, so you guys can go ahead and contact me through those means if you need to, and I have a Bitcoin tip jar too if you would like to donate. Now so I have a couple drawings here I made, so I'm just going to switch right into the video here and get it so we're recording my software. Okay, good. Cool. Now, so I want to explain how the money flow is working inside of this ecosystem, because when you have Ethereum, you also have all of these markets, you know, where it's being exchanged between. And with crypto, this is kind of less relevant only because there's so many different places where you can exchange anything for anything on the internet of crypto. And so it's kind of, well, it's not irrelevant, it's just that you can still, you know, exchange money through all means, but it's still relevant because there's a ton of volume that goes on in Poloniex specifically, and that dictates where the value of these go. So let me point out some things. You can see how there's just different markets here inside of the ETH markets, and that means that Ethereum is being spent on ETC, Lisk, Rep, Steem, and Zcash or Augur. So that means that you have multiple different places where Ethereum is going. So I drew this flow chart here where the money goes from fiat currency into Bitcoin, and from Bitcoin into Ethereum, and then from Ethereum can be exchanged interchangeably between ETC, Lisk, Rep, Steem, and Zcash. So the money is flowing in all directions right here. And so I made this little chart so you guys could see that. But it's something to keep in mind is what has the most volume. So for example, if the volume on ETC is really high, which it is right now, and same with Augur, then that means a lot of people are spending their ETH tokens on Augur coins and ETC. So there's a lot of money flowing different directions. Now, you want to keep in mind how much money is flowing in difference to the Bitcoin too, because it can also go, you have to remember that it can also go straight from Bitcoin into ETC, Lisk, Rep. So it can go from Bitcoin into all of the other ones too. So that's something else you have to keep in mind is, you know, where is the majority of the volume. But it's still looking like there's a ton of volume in these markets right now. So a lot of people are spending their ETH on, you know, Ethereum Classic instead of just spending their direct Bitcoin. So let me point something else out here real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and copy this. So this is the Ethereum Classic chart versus Ethereum and not Bitcoin. So that's something you want to look at, you know, see what is losing more value overall than the other one. So if ETC is losing more value overall against Ethereum, then you could say that it has the majority of the market interest. So whenever a single coin has more market interest, it usually means that that's the dominant coin being used too. So if we do see a huge shift in ETC where the value runs clear up and it gets mined a whole bunch and people are, you know, actually trading ETC a little bit more, and we see it run up in value, then we could assume now maybe that Ethereum would also crash. But that doesn't mean they can't coexist, because if the value comes straight from Bitcoin into ETC and into Ether at an equal rate, then you won't see a difference in the fact that they, you know, it won't be a thing whether they could coexist or not at the same time. It is possible that both of these things can coexist, obviously, because they're doing it right now. So, you know, you have to remember that it can go from Bitcoin into, you know, these, and from Ether into these. So it's something to keep your eye on, is where the volume is going. Now I want to point out a couple things here on the Ethereum Classic chart I have. This is against Bitcoin, and I like this chart the most because it gives me the most indicators. This one is, you know, pretty good, but it didn't really... This one's a lot simpler, but here I'll do a little drawing on this real quick too, in fact, actually. So I just want to point out that this one came up and had a ton of resistance right here. Okay, had a ton of resistance right here, but obviously there's still enough trending in this that it wanted to continue going up, and so it did, and it hyperinflated a little bit in between this area from about the 38% up. That's why the 38% level is so important in trading, is because when the hyperinflation happens, usually all of the hyperinflation is in between this 38%, I mean above this 38% range. So that means that it went clear up to here and then came clear down to here, but didn't go below here. So the hyperinflation stayed above the 38% range, and that's usually what happens. So it came up and above and hyperinflated a little bit, and what I mean by hyperinflation is just when it's worth a whole bunch, like it kind of makes this triangle formation, right? It's worth more than people are willing to pay for it for a minute, like over time, because this is kind of hard to explain. It's worth more than what the trend line is showing. Okay, so we have a standard trend line here. This is where the coin is trending up in value, but it kind of comes up and makes this triangle shape here, and then comes and hits that trend line again. So that's what I mean by hyperinflation, is that it went away from this trend line, clear up to a new area. And if it does this, usually it's going to stay above this 38% Fibonacci. And so that's what I wanted to point out, is that the trending is still above there, and that's a good thing to be paying attention to. Now I think this coin is going to go up in value, and it's one that I'm holding. I'm holding more of this in Ethereum, and that's just because I like the idea of it more personally. And this is a kind of heated debate, but everybody has their own opinion and everybody's entitled to that. And I don't have anything against Ethereum users and what they believe either. I just like ETC more. Now, this chart is pretty cool looking. It looks really good as a buy too. And what I want to show is that this range, it's following this range very, very well. It's done a lot of testing in this little area that it's been channeling up, and a little bit of, you know, that hyperinflation that I talk about up into these areas, but nothing above our standard resistance. So here's our two resistance areas, these two, and it hasn't gone above those resistance levels, so it's just been doing pretty standard, you know, hyperinflation out of there. But it's just been staying in this range really, really well. And whenever it comes down to the bottom of this range, we see tons of volume, as you can see what happened here in these support zones. it hit that 23% and we just saw an enormous amount of volume. And it comes up and hits this area, an enormous amount of volume. So it looks like when it comes and tests the bottom of this range it's been following, it pumps up hard, and that's what we've seen today, is a nice pump up in value. And that's why I'm going long on Ethereum Classic right now, is because I see a lot of up potential in this coin. Now obviously there's risk involved, and there's many factors to be thinking about. If Ethereum just runs clear up in value, then we could see a lot of ETC's value go back into Ethereum. And it's also important to remember that Ether can be spent on Lisk and Augur and Steam and Zcash, so people could be exchanging their Ether in other directions too, which might take Ethereum's value away but still not give any value to Ethereum Classic. So you just have to pay attention to where the market flow is going with this one specifically. And it's pretty important though to understand that with any coin. I mean, in the XMR markets too, you have to understand that. So those are things you want to be paying attention to. Now, what I think is going to happen here in Ethereum Classic short term is probably just a little drop down to this area again and then up like that. But I'm holding long. I'm not day trading this right now, so I'm just thinking that it's going to go up in my mind. You know, I don't really think about the short-term move as much, but it is something you want to watch out for, is this short-term move, because if you are invested into this coin and you're concerned about where the price is going and it starts to go down pretty hard, then you might panic sell, and you don't want to panic sell. So you have to remember that they do healthy movement along these resistance, and this is a resistance zone, so it wouldn't surprise me if it came down a little bit after that. And it could even come down and test, you know, 23 or 38 right here. These levels, that's not out of the scope of possibilities, and I wouldn't be selling until it broke this low. So those are things you want to look out for, is those resistance levels, because a market usually has better memory than we do, and it likes to go and find prices that it's been at before. It likes to find areas that it's had that same value and play around them. So yeah, I'm thinking Ethereum Classic is gonna go way up, and if it does do what I think it's gonna do and pump really, really hard, then it wouldn't surprise me if Ethereum loses a little bit of value. So I made a video on trading Ethereum and I talked about this, and I think that you really need to pay attention to that, is make sure that you should be focusing on both of them. That's kind of my emphasis for the video there, is that you want to be focusing on both of those things. Now, yeah, that's pretty much everything. I mean, I think it's a great buy. It's been following this zone. You're going to want to pay attention to support and resistance and where the money is flowing. So that's pretty much everything on this one. I hope you learned something and enjoyed this video. I appreciate your time, and as always, thank you for watching, and stay profitable.